Welcome back to another NASCAR team preview. I'm Casey Campbell, and you know that's Jonathan Fjeld from the Racing Experts. Today
Hello.
Today we are going to talk about 2311 racing. That's going to be an interesting year for them.
It is going to be an interesting year. You know, they have Kurt Busch coming over there for his first season with them, helping out Bubba Wallace. You know, of course, Bubba Wallace had a good last season, serviceable, I guess, in some ways, but, you know, a good start for the team. They got a win. They had some good runs. It was a good start for the team, and I think this season's going to be a lot of fun to watch them.
So let's start with last season. That was their first year. I know that, you know, they had some ups and downs like a first year team did. I mean, we saw it with 2311, we saw it with Trackhouse, and we saw it with Live Fast. All three first year teams this last year. But this year, 2311 really revamped their program, and we saw it last year when they brought Booty Barker back to be a crew chief after Mike Wheeler got moved to another position. And that really kind of turned things around for that team.
It really did. You know, toward the end of the season, we saw Bubba, you know, get that win at Talladega, and then we saw him run well as the season ended and making progress. I think that was a big thing because at the start of the season, the big thing that really plagued the team is they would run top 10, top 15, but then toward the end of the race, there would be some sort of mistake, some sort of miscue that would hit them and they would drop back. But I think they really cleaned up their act as the season went along. So I'll be curious to see how this upcoming season is now that they've had an off season to meet, to talk, to understand each other, and go out there and start hitting their stride at Daytona.
It's good to see Booty Barker back on the pit box. I'm not sure if he was going to be back because I know he was doing some other things, but yeah, he's back on the road again and really changed that team around. It's good to see. But now they're going to be a two-car team in 2022. Of course, as you mentioned, Kurt Busch comes over from the now closed down and now done Chip Ganassi Racing in NASCAR, on the NASCAR side at least. Of course, they're still in IndyCar, IMSA, and also that Extreme E program.
Mm-hmm.
You have Kurt Busch coming in there, and obviously that's a really good move because I don't know what we thought of what Kurt Busch was going to do next year, this 22, but it's definitely a good addition for him and a good addition to have him under the Toyota banner again. And I think it's going to be a really good combination. Monsters coming with him over to the 45 team and to see the 45 number back.
Yeah, for sure. You know, that was one thing they got a blessing from, of course, Kyle Petty, who last ran the number 45. Great to see that number back out on the track. And with Kurt Busch, too, because it really looked like 2021 might have been his final season. Of course, we found out very, very early into the silly season that it was not going to be his last season because he joined 2311 for this year. But it's just amazing to see Kurt Busch's run because, of course, he scored his first win back in 2002. He was the last full-time driver, so long as if Newman doesn't get a full-time ride, he'll be the last full-time driver to race against Dale Earnhardt. And so it's just amazing to see Kurt Busch still going and still competitive like he is. Led the most laps at his most recent win at Atlanta. First time in 6 years that he led the most laps in a race. So Kurt Busch, I think, is primed for one last run, maybe at a championship, at the very least, a solid round of 8 run. Of course, we'll get to that later, but I think this could be a really good season for Kurt Busch, really good season for Toyota as well.
Yeah. We talk about Toyota and they were like, oh, Toyota only had really one team. It was Joe Gibbs Racing, and they had Furniture Row and all them. But now they have really 2 solid teams. Because, of course, you have Joe Gibbs Racing, the flagship team. And then you have 2311, which is co-owned by, of course, Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin. Let's talk about Bubba Wallace for a second. How do you think Bubba's season was in 2021?
You know, I think it was a growing year. It was a year for Bubba to really take on the spotlight. You know, of course, heading into the season when you have Michael Jordan and one of the greatest basketball players of all time and Denny Hamlin, one of the most prominent NASCAR Cup Series drivers right now in the sport, behind you and backing you, and partners like McDonald's and DoorDash and Columbia, Dr. Pepper, all these different partners behind you and pushing you, and this national spotlight. That was a lot for Bubba Wallace. And I know he's touched on it before, and he's handled it very, very well. And combining that with a new team, which in and of itself is enough of a stressor for a driver, I think he did good. It wasn't the exorbitant great season that a lot of people had predicted for him, but it was a very solid first season. I think of it as like Ryan Blaney's first season with the Wood Brothers. It wasn't anything spectacular. It wasn't anything great, but it was something to get going. I think this season could be one where we see Bubba start to really break out. Some of those consistent runs turn into consistent finishes, maybe a couple wins. I think it was a good stepping stone for this year that we're going to see.
Yeah, absolutely. As we mentioned, Booty Barker working with Bubba Wallace. Let's kind of bounce around a little bit because that's what we do here. And obviously, yeah, because that's what we do. Kurt Busch, his crew chief, is a very familiar face. Billy Scott's back on the box for Kurt Busch in the 45 team this year. How exciting is that to see? And what do you think that combination will be like? They only lasted 1 year, but it's what do you think? How do you think that's going to go?
But you have to remember that was a really good year for Kurt Busch where he had Billy Scott on the box. So I think that
2018 for Stewart-Haas Racing overall too.
That's for sure. It was one of Kurt's best seasons in 2018. Of course, he had 12.1 average finish, 1 win, 6 top 5s, 22 top 10s. It was a good season for Kurt. I think Billy Scott also brings a lot of engineering expertise and wherewithal that's going to be important for this next gen car. He's had extensive time with the car, and I think that's really going to benefit, especially when you combine that with Kurt Busch, who has, last season, of course, was, if you can believe it, it was Kurt Busch's 21st full-time season. After 21 full-time seasons, you get a sense of how to adjust your car, how to, really pick up on different things that other drivers cannot. I think if you combine that with what Billy Scott brings to the table, I think you're going to see a lot of that magic you saw back in 2018.
I think so. And I think with Kurt and Bubba as teammates, I think that's going to be a really interesting dynamic as well. How do you think Kurt can help Bubba?
We were talking about this before we started recording, but Denny Hamlin even touched on how much Kurt has brought to the table before they've even run a full race, and just how talented Kurt is. And just as a mentor too, I think Kurt is going to do great with Bubba. Bubba, I think, needs someone to lean on, someone, you can bring all the pressures and worries and struggles and strengths to and relate it in a driver's sense. And I think Kurt is going to be wonderful for that. They're going to be good teammates.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we're going to see a lot of good things happening for them, and a lot of good partners are coming in. And we mentioned Lidios is back. Wheaties will be on the car. McDonald's announced that they're going to be on both cars. Of course, Monster Energy will be on a lot of Kurt Busch's rides. Still more details to figure out. We don't know what DoorDash's plans are just yet as of time of recording, but that's a really, really solid team. Let me ask you this. What do you expect out of 2311 this coming year?
I don't think it's unrealistic to say that both of the cars could make the playoffs this season. I certainly think Kurt Busch is going to make the playoffs. I like Tyler Reddick, we talked about in our RCR preview video. I have high expectations for Kurt Busch. I think this is the best equipment he's been in several years. And this is going to be, I think it's going to be a good year for Kurt Busch. I would not be surprised if he made it to the round of 8. Maybe he gets a championship 4 berth. I think we're going to see him make one last run at the NASCAR Cup Series championship. And we know Kurt Busch, this might be one of his last years And I think he's going to be driven to go out on top, get a few wins, get a championship, and really be an asset to that team. I think he's going to have a big year. Bubba Wallace, I think he's also going to have a good year too. I don't think he's going to be setting the world on fire with what he does, but I think we could see him in victory lane a couple times. I think he'll be a consistent top 10 runner. I could see a round of 12 berth. I don't know about the round of 8, but I think he could do solidly this season, kind of similar to how William Byron was last season.
Absolutely. We're gonna see a lot of big things coming out of that team. I do think both drivers will get to victory lane this year. It's gonna be interesting to see how far they go in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this 2311 racing preview. Stay tuned on the channel throughout all off season long because we have more previews coming out.
Mm-hmm.